Awesome. All right, welcome everyone. Where we're going to be picking up, unless I am corrected, which I always stand to be corrected, although I don't stand much. I don't know why I would lead with that joke, but that's what we're doing. Oh, Terry, it should have been heads. You should have won the coin toss. All right. Where we're picking up is on page 25. And we're at the very, very bottom paragraph of page 25. And it says, if you are as seriously alcoholic as we were. So that's where we're at, bottom paragraph, page 25. If you're as seriously alcoholic as we were. Now, I'm just going to pause right there because I will tell you, when I got here, I sure hoped I wasn't. I sure hoped I showed up to the rooms at 12 step after a series of unfortunate oopsie doopsies and whoopsie daisies that got me hanging out with you lovely folks, in the church basements and community halls. And it just must have been just a bad string of luck and a series of unfortunate events that led me to hang out with you with the coffee creamer that won't stir into the coffee no matter how hard you try. Unless maybe you guys got those fancy meetings with that liquid creamer. Wild. Zoom, BYOCC, bring your own coffee creamer. But I was hoping I wasn't as seriously alcoholic as you. I was hoping I had a bit of like alcoholism light, addiction light, and I could then do the sugar-free option of the 12 steps, I was hoping I wasn't as bad as you. And it says, if you're seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. And we can make a note of that. And if you're like me, you're like, girl, that is not good news. I was wanting one of those. I was actively seeking for one that was the middle of the road. I do not want to be having to do all of the things that those people who identify as recovered or real have to do. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to have to do steps. Goodness gracious. You know what I mean? I'm hoping this sort of thing doesn't apply to me. I'm looking for a middle of the road solution. And it says, we were in a position where life was becoming impossible. And at that moment, I'm always like, girl, how did you know? How did you know? Right? So, see, my life was impossible, and it felt impossible when I was drinking or in my addiction or when I was sober. It felt impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, I hope I'm not there. I hope I'm at a different geographic location in my life. I still hope I'm in the human aid region. And so what we need to find out before we look at the consequences of if I am beyond human aid, I got to figure out if I'm beyond human aid. So I'm doing a little bounce, little baby bounce, not a big old bounce, just a baby bounce. Let's go to the bottom of page 24. And very bottom paragraph of page 24. And if you were here last week, you probably have some notes written in your book. It says, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, and the sort of thinking with which we are describing is that of the mental obsession that we saw on page 24, that I need to stay sober, I want to stay sober, I have to stay sober, but I find myself drinking or using or whatever brings you to this all-inclusive study again and again and again, and I'm doing it again and again and again. I have the obsession of the mind. So that is the thinking that we're talking about. And when it says it's fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, now we're not going to go the full bounce to page XXX like we did last week, because that feels like a little much for the first paragraph for me to be bouncing us around that hard. But what I will point out is to have those alcoholic tendencies, that is to have the allergy of the body. That once I start, I have that thing inside of me that sets off and I need more. And the more that I drink or the more that I use or the more that I engage in that addictive behavior, the more that I need. And it is only those two characteristics. It says, when I have those, alcoholic thinking, alcoholic tendencies, I have probably placed myself beyond human aid. And unless locked up, may die or go permanently insane. So to diagnose us, if we have any experience in our life of taking a drink or taking a drug or taking an addictive behavior or substance and having that thing set off and we can't control it, sounds like we got some tendencies. And if we have ever said, no, that's it, I don't want to do it again, and done it again, and done it again, and done it again. Had that thought this time will be different, nobody will ever know, I got to get it out of my system, you know, case of the suddenlies, anything like that. If I've had any experience like that, I got that thinking. And it looks like, uh-oh, I'm beyond human aid. I'm not going to diagnose you, but I'll let you know I am beyond human aid. And some of you are like, Carol, that was readily apparent before you bounced us over to page 24. We knew that early and often already. So back to the bottom of page 25. Baby bounce, not a big one. So that turns out that's me. I am that type of person that is beyond human aid. Bottom of page 25. It says we had two alternatives. And this is pretty black and white. Pretty black and white. Only two. Only two. And I talk about how if I can accept the black and white predicament that I am in, man, the world's going to open up to technicolor. A little like the Wizard of Oz when Dorothy goes through the door. You guys know what I'm saying? Like that. So it says we had two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could. And the other, to accept spiritual help. And I'll be real with you, it is totally reasonable for that to feel like a tough choice. Like, ooh, like I'm like, ooh, where's that middle of the road option? You know what I mean? Bless you. I know it's the worst when I catch that when people sneeze and stuff. Um, like I am looking for that middle of the road option. I'm looking for that easier, softer way. I want that. I want the half measures. Actually, I don't want half measures. That still feels like a lot of work. I'll take quarter measures, you know. I'll do a third, you know, if you really push me. But that is the thing. If I do not choose to accept spiritual help, there is no other option. There is only to go on to the bitter ends, trying to blot out the consciousness of my intolerable situation as best we could. And that is the reality, the predicament that I am in if I have this illness. There are only two options, whether I think so or not. Now, I am only talking about people who have this illness. If I don't have this illness, I got choices, I got options. I do not have those. I have burnt those to the ground. I don't got any other option. So what that means is if I do not actively and intentionally choose with everything that is in me to accept spiritual help, to work these 12 steps as a way of life, like my life depends on it because it does, then what that means is whether I think so or not, or I like it or not, I've chosen to go on to the bitter end. There is no third option. That is the predicament that I'm in. To not choose is to choose. So if I do not choose this way of life, I have chosen the alcoholic death. And it says this we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort. And I'll toss it over to Terry. Pew, pew.
That's fine. I was just thinking about the Wizard of Oz, right? Follow the yellow brick road, and then they veer off the yellow brick road, and those flying monkeys. You know, if I accept spiritual help, I'm in harmony. The 12 steps get me to this point of living right here, right now, in harmony with the world and its people. When I decide to veer off, because I like to veer off, those little flying monkeys come and grab my ass, right? I don't know why you just put that thought in my head. But it says, if you're seriously alcoholic as we were, that's a statement. Am I seriously alcoholic as these people were talking about? Yeah. We believe there's no middle of the road solution. Now, I've talked about spectrums, where you at in your spectrum. And this book appeals to someone who is the real alcoholic, the serious alcoholic. It talks a lot to the low bottom feeder like me. It sings to me, this book, when I read it, right? Babe's here. It's like a book of mirrors, right, babe? Just I'm looking at myself, right? But there's this no middle of the road solution. And at the end of my recovery, I first time I actually voluntarily went to an actual meeting because I didn't know what to do. I lost control. I lost the power to choose whether I was going to drink or not. Couldn't stay sober longer than an hour. My life was on fire, and I was begging for help, even though I've been in AA since 1999, where you used to actually smoke cigarettes in meetings. 14 smoking bowls in me. And I didn't really want to, I didn't want to stop. I didn't even care, right? But at the end, I wanted to, and I could not because I was seriously alcoholic. I was at that point where I was a real deal. And I was approached by people who, who were armed with opinions. And I think we were just talking about this earlier, and these opinions are really good suggestions for specific moments in recovery. They told me not to drink. They told me to go to a meeting. They told me you're on steps one, two, three. You're not ready to do step four. You need to wait a year. They told me all sorts of things that, for someone like me, I was too sick to stay off of just going to meetings. That was me. Now, if you have that experience where you can stay sober and go to a meeting and you are a real alcoholic, then God bless you. I mean, I'm wondering, I'm like, I asked one of my friends, I was like, why do people can make, a couple amends and, maybe leave something out in their fifth step and maybe sponsor one person every other full moon and they're happy and content and they're sober. But why not me? Like why are these people that, could just, have a service commitment and have their service triangle heavy, but not really treat their mind with practicing 10, 11, and 12 on a day-to-day basis? Why are these people happy and content, but why am I not? Well, when my sponsor or my friend told me at that time, my mentor told me at the time, he said go to page 34 and it says whether a person could quit on a spiritual basis depends on the extent. Underline and highlight that word extent. How far did you go? Whether he's lost the power to choose, whether he's going to drink or not. How far did you go? That was my experience. And as the progression goes on in sobriety as well, we get sicker. That's why we need to constantly grow and fit spiritual condition to offset it. And I was approached by these people, and I came to the conclusion that these people were not trying to hurt me. They were trying to offer something that was given to them by someone else, right? They learned it from someone, and they learned it from someone else, and they learned it from someone else, and so on and so forth. These are people that cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. I don't blame them. I was one of them. I was one of them. I did not want to do any of this stuff. I think I talked about this earlier. I have what is called ADD, alcoholic defiance disorder, you know, or addict defiance disorder, right? I've resisted everything, and I'm working with some people who had a slip after 2 years recently, and they had that addict defiance disorder, and they let it run rapid. They decided to get off the yellow brick road. It it's a choice. Like you have a choice to stay in harmony, or you have a choice to go and play with the flying monkeys, and then get chewed up and bit up and scratched up. I dance between that sometime. But am I a seriously alcoholic and I'm willing to do whatever it takes to stay sober? I try my best to accept spiritual help, even though I don't like it. My mind doesn't like it. It fights all the time. That's why we don't have stadiums filled with us, because this is really powerful, little minion in my head, right? I mean, it says life is almost becoming impossible. Like shit, I am on fire. Picture yourself on fire, hypothetically, and there's a nice crisp lake in front of you. Like it's super crisp. It's nice. It looks cool. It's got that little steam, right? And all you gotta do is jump in there, and the fire is gone. But I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm like going back and forth. I'm hesitating. I'm hesitating because I'm listening to this story in my head. Is life becoming extremely impossible? I mean, look at resentments. Anyone had a resentment recently? I have towards my boss. I was trying to get one of these cotter pins onto the truck. It was a little small one, babe, really small. And I couldn't. I was trying to do it. I couldn't get it on. And then he's like, "Get out of my way!" And he pulls the wing up on this truck. I plow snow, and we have a wing on the truck. He pulls the wing up. He had assistance where I was doing it on the ground. I couldn't see, and he literally bent it back, pulled it forward, less tension on it, and he got it. He looked right back at me. He's like, "That's how a real man does it." In front of everybody. This was it yesterday? I'm losing my mind. Yeah, it snowed yesterday. Yeah, this was yesterday. And I'm looking at him, I'm like, that son of a bitch. Sorry for my language. That's why I like Alcoholics Anonymous. You could say fucking God in the same sentence, right? I mean, like, I said, that son of a bitch. And I'm looking at him, and dude, my mind took over. Life became impossible. Now, I don't know, probably the most spiritual place I ever go to in my entire life, if anyone could agree with me or disagree with me, this is my opinion, take it or leave it, is the bathroom. I go right to the bathroom, and I'm like, where life is becoming impossible. Either I accept spiritual help or I could blot out my consciousness to the bitter end. Now, I could allow that story to run rapid in my head. That's the thing with resentment. We nurture it, we grow it, we fan resentments, right? We like to watch it grow up, right? We play with it, we replay it. I could go over and over, And then in that moment, I said, you know what? Let's accept spiritual help. I asked God to remove it. I abandoned myself utterly in that moment. Did not do it on my knees in that dirty ass bathroom. I did it standing up. And I said, God, please remove this. And as I'm walking out, I'm still a little pissy. And I walk in, I talk to my buddies at work, and we're all laughing about something that I did earlier, not the cotter pin, and it got relieved. What happened to my resentment? It's because I accepted spiritual help. I prayed to a higher power in that moment where I could have just listened to my story in the head and not talk to anyone. When I go into resentment, I get very dark. I don't talk to anyone. I'm the kind of cat that treats isolation with loneliness with isolation. That's me, right? And I bury myself in self-pity, and you know what? I think let's go take a drink instead, right? And I want to notice that they give us two options. Where's door number three, Paige? Why? What the F, Paige? Where's door number three? Now, I have tried every known means of figuring out door number three, and I found out there is no door number three. Either practice witchcraft or blot out my consciousness in the bitter end. Like, that's are my options in my head. I decided to take that. What is it in the Matrix? We take the red pill, the blue pill. Which one's the good one? The blue pill? Whatever. I went down the rabbit hole. Right? I went down the rabbit hole and there's no turning back. My eyes are awake. Right? But here's the kicker. They give us two options again later on. I think if we agnostics as well. And I suck at doing both of them. I really do. I suck at blotting out my consciousness. I suck at that stuff. Right? I also suck at accepting spiritual help. Right? I suck at both. You guys know about ADD. I lack power. That's the kicker. I need an acquisition of power. This is all setting us up to the world. We need a relationship with power to live. It says we need to find a power by which we can live. Does not say we need to find a power which will help us not drink by living. And when I build that relationship with power, it separates me from alcohol, but also makes me happy, useful, and whole. And here's the other kicker. It says this I did because I honestly wanted to. That's a statement for all of us? Do you guys honestly want to accept spiritual help? Like not really, but why not? I got there's no other choice for me, right? I honestly mean intuitive, meaning I'm admitting to my innermost self that I honestly want to try this and willing to make the effort. Now, I think willingness is kind of a state of grace. I think it's a gift. I think that's something I cannot self-will into fruition. Willingness comes through a lot of pain. And that's been my experience where I've had enough pain where I'm like, you know what? I'm willing to do it because I got two alternatives, right? And when I accept spiritual help, my life becomes indescribably wonderful. I don't get it. I don't get intellectually understand and grasp this program. I really don't, Paige. It's I really don't. But I can experience this program. Like I feel absolutely free. I mean, I'm thinking about like I'm 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 in my house watching my son. There's drugs in the cabinet that my wife takes that are narcotics. She has alcohol up there, and I'm not thinking about any of it. I'm just like, whatever, whatever. And it's not even on my mind. I'm just thinking about how can I be useful to someone on here who's still sick and still suffering. I'm not thinking about me, I'm thinking about you. I was really excited to get on here, Paige, because I haven't read the big book out loud to another person in a few days. I get loopy. I get loopy. So I'm back to you, Paige. Pew pew pew.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Top of page 26. A certain American businessman. And if you're writing in your book today, you can make a note that this is, now he doesn't have to be your homie, but he's my homie. So you don't have to write Paige's homie, but make a little note that this is Roland Hazard. Rowland Hazard. Hazard a guess as to how that's spelled. Who thought I was going to make a pun there? Hazard. And one of the things that I like to do, if I got it, I'm just going to do a little screen share, just so that we can kind of see who we're talking about, right? So when we talk about this guy, Roland Hazard, he's the gentleman. I've got all these windows open and I can't really see the screen that I've shared. So I'm like trying to move all the stuff out of the way so I can get it more visible for you guys. But this guy up at the top, woo, Roland Hazard, top right, handsome fella, charming gentleman. It says a certain American businessman had good sense and high character. Now, this is a guy by the name of Roland Hazard, and his actual full name is Roland Hazard the Third. And you know, if you got a name that follows the third, you come from money. Now, this is a guy that came from money. So he had wealth and he had influence. And I like to tell, none of the history husbands are here to correct me, so I can kind of make up what I want. I won't. But I do like to imagine, I believe his family was, in all seriousness, involved in textiles. But I imagine, he's living large and the Great Depression hits and he's like, oh no, I need to sell one of the many yachts, like, oh, times are tough. So that's where he's at. But I want to point out this guy, Roland, he's got ability, good sense, high character. Do we feel like we're showing up to life with ability, good sense, and high character? I mean, not me ever, not me even in a recovered state. But Roland, so he's got these characteristics, but it's not enough to keep him sober. It says for years he floundered from one sanitarium to another. And so when we think sanitarium, think rehab. So he's going from one rehab to another, to another, to another. And it's not working. It's not enough to keep him sober. And have we had an experience like this? Now, to be fair, I do think Roland Hazard was more after a harm reduction approach. He's like, I would like to drink with impunity. But when it talks about how he floundered from one sanitarium to another, we can make a note that that is the obsession of the mind. Because if he had the ability to choose whether he would drink or not, he would not be going from sanitarium to sanitarium. It goes on to say he had consulted the best known American psychiatrists. So he is visiting the best of the best of the best in the United States because he's got money to throw at this thing. And it is not enough. He can't find that permanent contented sobriety. So it says that he had then gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, Dr. Young. So he's got to travel all the way over to Switzerland and to visit and to work intensively with this guy. Now I'm going to point something out. There's a myth in the rooms and a myth in AA history. And the myth that is often repeated is the idea that Roland Hazard, he actually wanted to see Sigmund Freud. And that he wanted to see Sigmund Freud, but thankfully for us, Freud was not accepting new patients. Now that story is not true, but that's okay. That's okay. Because I always, when we talk about the history and when we have some of these like things where it's like, oh, you pulled the covers on that one, Paige. You suck. You told me Santa wasn't real. I have no opinion on Santa. I didn't say Santa wasn't real. Oh no, I hope there's no little ones around. My bad. But it's like, girl, what? How could you say that? You know what I mean? But I always like to look at these myths because Alcoholics Anonymous, actually, let me be clear, the story and the history of Alcoholics Anonymous is all about parables. And parables are stories that convey a meaning, a lesson. So why would this story get repeated again and again? Well, in part, it was repeated by Joe and Charlie, who are pioneers in terms of big book studies and so influential around the world. But the message of that story is that the idea that Sigmund Freud had believed that all problems, all matters of the mind could be solved in and of the mind, where Carl Jung believed that there were certain conditions that required spiritual help. And so I believe the reason that that myth in particular persists is to point to the nature of, man, God all over this thing, all over this thing. But again, that idea that human power is not enough. And that's what we're trying to get at. And that's what we're trying to see here. So he goes all the way to Switzerland. He works intensively with the psychiatrist, Dr. Young. Now, keep in mind, Dr. Young, he is probably the second, if not the most famous psychiatrist in the world. That's the money that this guy had to spend on it. Like, he has got money. And it says who prescribed for him. So he's working with him intensively. Though experience had made him skeptical. So even though every other doctor, psychologist, therapist, counselor, treatment center, I'm going to use a modern word for it, rehab, retreat facility, everything that he had thrown at it had failed. That's what it means when it says though experience had made him skeptical. He finished his treatment with unusual confidence. Now, we don't have to do a show of hands, but anyone ever finish rehab with unusual confidence or come to AA with the sense of, no, or 12 step, like, oh, this time's different. I got a feeling about this one. There's something different about it, right? And it says his physical and mental condition were unusually good. So he's feeling really good. He's feeling mentally quite positive. Above all, which is to say, more importantly, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. So Roland Hazard left Carl Jung filled with like he's feeling positive, he's feeling good, but he's also filled with this idea that he knows himself so well. He's got self-knowledge. He's worked through his stuff. He's figured out his triggers. He's dealt with some of his trauma. Like, I'm trying to use some modern words to describe. He has done some inner work, and he's like, there is absolutely no way that he will ever relapse. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. And that is not a surprise to anyone that is hanging out with us on a Friday night. He was drunk in a short time. And you can make a little note that that was the obsession of the mind. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall. He did not know why he did it. It made no sense that he did it. And I'm pointing to that because that is the power of the mental obsession. All the money in the world, all the knowledge in the world, all the desire in the world is not sufficient for someone like me. And I'll pew pew over to Terry.
Thanks, Pete. Who's floundered from one rehab to the other? You know, I've been to six, so I got Bill beat. He had three. I think he had four, right? He had a fourth one, I think. Thank God the history husbands aren't here. I don't want to talk history when they, I know they correct my ass. Um, but I got a friend in California. His name's Adam T. If you never heard Adam T before, just go on YouTube and put Adam T and just throw a dart at one of his talks. It's great. I think he went to 29 or 34 rehabs. It's in that range. Don't quote me. But he basically said he spent $500,000 on a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's basically what we do, right? I mean, who had unusual confidence every single time they left? I feel better, look better. I got this. Above all, he says in this text, like, I know the inner workings of my mind, self-knowledge. This set up paragraph from self-knowledge ain't gonna help you. Me intellectually trying to swallow this program, just it doesn't work that way. All right. And this is our second doctor that the book introduces us to, kind of keep that in note. We're gonna see another guy named Percy Pollock as well, and all three of them, and to kind of give you guys a hint, we already read the doctor's opinion. All three of them are basically saying we're screwed. You know, we don't know what to do with these people. I mean, this dude spent a whole year with this dude, Dr. Carl Jung, and I think what he drank on the in Paris or something like that on the way back or something like that. Paige, correct me. Yeah, we could extend. We could.
That's the myth that goes around, but I think it might have actually been a trip to Africa that was the big relapse. Uh,
Okay.
but we also got to be careful because Mary will absolutely rat us out to the history.
Uh, it's okay.
She's solid. She's solid. You can rat us
Look,
out anytime. We're here for it.
look, I'm just following the footsteps of Bill W. I stretch the truth to make a point. You like to stretch the truth, so do we. We're trying to make a point. Doctor says you screwed, that we need some type of higher power. And thank God this guy was, I think he had a spiritual way of living, right? Or religious leanings, right? I believe, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, Paige. This guy, had a belief in a power greater than ourselves. And thank God he met with this dude, right? Because he's going to say it like on the next page. And I don't want to give you guys I don't want to, I don't want to go forward. And what's up, buddy? Hold on. All right, Paige, take over for a second.
Absolutely. So it says, so he returned to this doctor whom he admired. Keep in mind, we talk about Carl Jung today and the influence he has had. How could you not admire? And again, human power is insufficient. And asked him point blank why he could not recover. I mean, he is like, dude, what the heck? That's verbatim. I have that as a transcript. Dude, what the heck? Why can't I recover, my guy? Uh, it says he wished above all things to regain self control. He wanted more than anything else to have self control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control over alcohol. Why was this? We can ask ourselves, is this my experience? Are there areas of my life where it seems like yeah, I got my stuff together and I'm well balanced and I'm able to show up. But when it comes to the thing that is driving us to this big book study, that I have no control, no power, choice, control. It's got me. And I don't know why. And there's nothing I can do. Do you want to take it from there, Terry? Pew, pew.
What's the next paragraph? So he begged the doctor. Uh-oh.
Yeah, absolutely.
He begged, excuse me, he begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, opinion, he was utterly or completely hopeless. He could never regain his position in society. He would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great doctor's opinion. That doesn't sound very pleasant opinion to get, right? Yet again, the book is just trying to tell us that this is a famous doctor. We've already had another well-known doctor, Dr. Silky, tell us that we don't know what to do with you. You guys are hopeless. All three of them say it in a different way. Am I as hopeless as the doctor's talking about? What does it say? Regain self-control. Did I have no control, whatever, over alcohol? Ask yourself that question. Have I had no control over alcohol or self-control in general? Yeah, no, I lost it. All right. I guess I'll read the next paragraph. But this man still lives and is a free man. Whoa, what happened? He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. This dude can go anywhere on earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided. Shit, there's a kicker, right? Knew this was conditional. I thought we are supposed to get sobriety off the back and be struck sober. Damn it. Provided I do what? I remain willing to maintain a certain simple attitude. What's this simple attitude? You could say God could and would if he were sought, or God can and will if he were sought. You could go reference to page 55. It talks about attitude all throughout the big book. It's a belief system. where it talks about if I lay aside or sweep away my prejudice, not just lay it aside, get rid of it. Right? Think honestly, and I search diligently with myself with this attitude, I can't fail. I mean, if I remain willing to maintain it, maintain means to keep going. I'm pretty sure that's the 1930s definition. Thank God the history husbands aren't here, but Paige, she's got that damn 1930s dictionary. She could correct it. I'm pretty sure maintain means to keep going. That's probably the hardest thing to do here is to keep this way of life continuously going. I think I've said this many times, babe. You've heard this a lot. You can put your earmuffs on, buddy. Earmuffs. You don't have to hear me. All right? I got good news, I got bad news, and I got great news, everyone. The good news, this program works. It does. The bad news is you have to do it for the rest of your life. Maintaining, you have to keep it going until the day you die. And the great news is that your life becomes indescribably wonderful when you continuously keep it going. Right? I just look back at my life and I think I talked about this earlier. It was just a fairy tale that came true. I'm looking back at it. I'm like, look, who would ever predicted I would have had this little kid right here? Like, like I say, hey, say hi, Peter. Like, that's a fairy tale that's come true. I mean, 6 years ago, I was begging God, why are you keeping me alive? And now I get to hang out and put and dance around with this little guy. Oh, he wants the phone. All right, Paige, back to you. Pew, 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 pew.
Perfect timing. I just got maintain. Support, sustain, defend, vindicate, affirm, continue. There it is. And if you want me to repeat that, I just closed the book. So you'll have to, I shouldn't have done it like that, but I did it like that. Oopsie doops. All right. And what I want to talk about on the bottom of 26, when he's asking Carl Jung point blank, why can't I recover? And the doctor gives him the whole truth. He tells him what's really going on with him. He says, in the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. And I always, always want to emphasize hopeless because when I can see the hopelessness of my predicament, I'm able to grab a hold of the hope. Utterly hopeless. And it says he could never regain his position in society and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. And I'm gonna point something out. I read that for a long time, and I'm like, haha, sucks to be you, Roland. That is some bad news. That's that's no fun. Yikes. Good news. You got money though. You could probably afford one of those. But let's pop back over to the bottom of page 24 again. I'm being a big smelly jerk. It says when this sort of thinking, mental obsession is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, physical allergy, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid. And unless locked up, they die or go permanently insane. It's not bad news, Roland. It's bad news, Paige. Bad news, me. Bad news, Bears. Like, no, it's me. I am in the exact same predicament that Roland Hazard has. And I'll be quite honest with you, I don't have the same checkbook. Uh, Absolutely not. I don't got those resources. My income, I promise you, it is not disposable. Oh, and yes, I love that idea that like I get to go anywhere free. We get freedom. That's what's available. That's what's on offer, but it's contingent, as Terry was saying. And for me, that attitude is that God keeps me sober, and I got to continue to build and maintain that relationship with that power. Now, I love this top of page 27. It says some of our readers may think they can do without spiritual help. This is the book, again, another example of the book coming and meeting us where we're at. It's meeting us where we're at. Because I might be reading this, listen, I'm not interested in your spiritual help. It's like, hey, some of you might not be interested. So it says, let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, you have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I have never seen one single case recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you. And in this moment, it says, our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. And here's the thing about the gates of hell, they don't swing both ways. You know what I mean? Once that gate is closed, that gate is closed. And our friend Roland Hazard, in the gates of hell, it is closed on him. There are no 12 steps that exist in history at this time. But I'll tell you, that sounds like a step one experience to me. That's the, he's, and like the next question he's going to ask, I'll say it and I'll give it to you. It says, he said to the doctor, is there no exception? You could almost tell and read the desperation, the incredulity. Oh man, I'm not going to land that word today. He's like incredulous. He's like, there's got to be something, because he knows he's got nothing. And that feels like a step one experience. So over to Terry. Pew pew.
Yeah, and so notice why we read the doctor's opinion first, and to make it super depressing for you. Yeah, we're supposed to make you feel depressed about your step one experience, right? And then he's like crying out in desperation. Is there no exception? Like, I'm looking for a way out. I don't know where to go, but I'm willing to do whatever because I got a thorough ass whooping in step one, just like we talked about with the kangaroo. I won't have to repeat that again. But it says, yes, replied the doc. There is, bro. Remember, that's how they talk back then, right? Mary, don't tell your husband that. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics or addicts have what are called vital spiritual experiences. I don't think good writers repeat themselves, but you might repeat that just two words again. To me, these occurrences are phenomenal. Like, I don't know. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, which is my thinking, emotions, which are my feelings, and attitudes, which are my belief system, which were the guiding forces of my life, are suddenly, what's that word suddenly, Pete? Yeah. And then you notice that suddenly is a time frame in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. That also means now. Look at our nine-step promises. Suddenly, you know, I realized that God was doing for me what I could not do for myself. That's an effect of living in the now, effect of living in the world of the spirit. Suddenly happens, spiritual experience casts one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. Basically, we're rearranging your spirit. We're rearranging your house. Anyone rearrange their house or their apartment, or move some furniture around? I used to run gyms for a long time, and what we would do is that when you take machines off the floor, the gym looks bigger. So less is more, actually. So we take one of the Stairmasters off, and a couple people get all pissed off because they missed their Stairmaster. But then most of the people just be like, "Whoa, this gym looks bigger. It looks cleaner for some odd reason, right?" We're doing a complete rearrangement of all your thinking and feelings and belief systems. This is what's going to happen when you go through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. That's why we don't like it. That's why we just read on page 24, it says almost none of us liked the dot dot dot. Yet again, I don't like it because against everything I've ever believed in. Just think of everything you've ever believed in and held strong to, right? And that you would, willing to argue someone to the end of time about, or anything that any thoughts that you may have had, or any feelings you've ever had. Like sometimes I tell people straight up, man, I'm like, I'd rather step on your feelings than step on your toes. Like straight up. Just depends on where they're at in their journey. I'm usually kind of a nice, kind little guy, right? Talking to people, I'm more of that type of person. But when push comes to shove, if I need to be if I need to be transparent, I'll be transparent. And I'm going to tell them that when you're having this defiance, ADD, what's happening is that the alcoholic ego, the addict ego, is fighting for its life when you go through this. Anyone feel uncomfortable when they do the steps? Come I hope I'm not the only one here. Oh, I love doing the snaps. They're great right now. Gosh, they're uncomfortable as hell because they go against all your old personality. And your old personality, when you have a spiritual experience afterwards, right, it will pop up. It'll start to scratch a little, put its little head to the surface and talk a little bit louder, old feelings, old belief systems. But that's why we need to continuously grow up here. Am I willing to grow up? Step six. All right. All right. In fact, I've been trying to produce such an emotional rearrangement within you, not outside of you, not confine you to. Honestly, I thought I needed to be locked up in order to stay sober. That was my deal. I didn't understand. Here's the crazy thing is that the problem is within you. But here's the craziest part. So is the solution. That 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 blew my mind. I'm like, hold on. The solution's within me. Meaning if the what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of all the things that are blocking me off from this power so burst out of me. And I will have this connection, this feeling of harmony as I walk hand in hand and with this power, this relationship with this power, right? With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description. Yeah, back to you, Paige. Pew, pew, pew.
Pew, pew, pew. And so that's right there. When it says, yes, there is, replied the doctor, there is. The miracle that there is an exception. Because, and I love that we got in I'll just do that. I love that in the, sorry, I don't have the ADD that Terry was talking about. I got the other one. I got the other one where there's a squirrel, and then I'm like, off I go. Yeah, focus, focus. All right. Uh, when he's talking about the exception, keep in mind alcoholics, addicts, people that are coming to this study, man, for us to have contented permanent sobriety does not happen. Contented permanent sobriety is a miraculous state. Miraculous state. It is rare. But when he says here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences, that is life giving spiritual experiences, life giving. And that you can make a little note is our solution. And in this moment, that first piece of the puzzle comes into play. What is the solution for people like us? A spiritual awakening. And that's what it is in the rooms of 12 step. A spiritual awakening. That's what I need. Now, again, I'm going to talk a little bit more about the myth of like, why might we have thought he wanted to see Sigmund Freud, right? And then the myth of like, thank goodness, and now this, I'm just making a joke. Thank goodness, because otherwise we'd be sitting here on Zoom talking about what cigars really mean. Thank goodness we're not doing that. Uh, but part of, I think, where that myth could have come from is Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung knew each other. They were contemporaries of each other, and they had a falling out. But in 1909, there was a conference, and it was the Clark Conference, I believe it is what it was called. And in that conference, there were the three important, or at least interesting individuals: Dr. Carl Jung, Dr. Sigmund Freud, and William James. And if y'all are like, who the heck is William James, girl? Well, we're going to talk about him probably not this week. Well, I'm going to talk about him now because I don't think we're going to get to him this week. And I want to talk about the guy. And so William James wrote the book called Varieties of Religious Experience. It was originally a series of lectures that were given at Edinburgh University, and talking about the phenomenon of a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. That was his area of study. And I was just, yeah. So basically at this conference, so I'm going to tell some of the history that I'm going to tell is a little bit accurate, and some of it is me paging it up with a little bit of space. That's the only place I can have space because I have a very sensitive stomach. So I have my spice in the history. Uh, but so what happens? And kind of the story is William James wasn't very popular at the conference. Now, I was reading a thing because I have the attention span of an absolute gnat. And the people were like not really interested in what William James had to say. And this is the part where I'm making up the history. So I imagine that everyone is like, "Ooh, Freud, Freud," and he's like the biggest K-pop star. Everybody wants his autograph. As the kids say, he's got Riz. So he's popping, and everyone's like, and so he's in this hall, and everyone's crowding and crowding to see Freud. Oh, Freud, my fave. And then Carl Jung, he's over Freud. I don't actually know if historically they weren't getting along at this point in history, but listen, I'm making it up. Uh, but so he's out in the hallway. This is the part there's elements of truth, but I'm stretching it. Ooh, the truth. She's doing Pilates. She's doing hot yoga right now. She's stretching. Uh, but they're out in the hallway. Carl Jung, and he's not interested in Freud, but he strikes up a conversation with William James, who shares with him information about this phenomena that he has been studying called religious experiences. And so a seed perhaps gets planted. And I talk quite a lot about this famous BBC interview with Carl Jung many, 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 many years later. But it's this famous BBC interview where Carl Jung is being asked, growing up, did you believe in God? And he says, yeah, growing up, I believed in God. And then he's asked, do you believe in God now? And he says, no. And there's a pause. And he says, I've got no need for belief. And there's a pause. And he says, I know. And you see, that's what we're after. At this moment in time, Roland Hazard's just getting smacked over the head with a step two. He's just believing, could there be a spiritual awakening? Could that exist? But he doesn't have it yet. It is that with knowing. And some of y'all know that I love to go on my etymology tangents, which is different than etymology, entomology, different than that. It's the origin of words. And when we talk about agnostic, it is Greek, is ag is without, and gnosis is knowing, without knowing of God. So when I come to these steps, I might have belief, I might have faith, I might have even had some moments, but I have not had that heart level experiential knowing that is required to keep me sober. But at step 11, I seek to improve my conscious contact. Conscious is Latin, completely different language, but con means with, and shus or sire means knowing. So I go from without knowing to taking a course of action that later becomes our 12, well, in history, becomes our 12 steps. For me, I took the 12 steps. And I have this experience. And I go from without knowing to with knowing. And that's what we're after. And it's a phenomenon. It's not something that is easily explained or understood. And actually, in the book, Varieties of Religious Experience, William James sort of uses this metaphor of it's like trying to explain what it's like to be drunk to somebody who has never drank. It's a little like that. And that's why when we talk about the spiritual realm, the spiritual awakening, we use a lot of synonyms and metaphors and similes, because we're pointing to something that is ineffable, that needs to be experienced, to be understood, that is intangible, that I need to experience. And that experience, that this huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were guiding me and leading me, suddenly cast to one side. And what I want to point out about suddenly, not just the timeline is so, as Thierry so eloquently said, but man, it doesn't take long to get well. It does not take long to recover. It does not take long to have this experience that I need in order to recover. It does not take long. And he's saying like, hey, I was trying to give you that, but I couldn't. Now, bottom paragraph of page 27, upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved. Whew, spiritual awakening? That's all I need? Cool. for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. That great, wonderful. I go to church. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, the doctor's saying, like, listen, it is good that you go to church because that means you already have some sort of belief. That's more than enough as a place to start. But he goes on to say, in his case, they did not spell the necessary, vital spiritual experience, a life giving experience. And Carl Jung was said to have told him, listen, the odds of this thing happening to you are the odds of you getting struck by lightning. You can't hang out in a church pew and just kind of hope something happens. You've got to go out and seek it. And just to tie sort of some of the things together, where he goes is he gets involved with an organization that was known as the Oxford Group. And the Oxford Group, their whole deal, like their focus wasn't on sobering up drunks, although they did sober up some of them. There were some people who did get sober in the Oxford Group. That wasn't their purpose. Their purpose was about developing a relationship with God, a surrendered life to this power. That was their whole idea. And Roland Hazard, knowing he needs a spiritual awakening, he's like, oh, well, why don't I go? These guys are talking about that sort of stuff. Why don't I go there? And he gets involved with them. And from them, we developed what is today our 12 steps, a course of action that will create this phenomenon every single time it is rigorously applied. So that's all I have to say, and I'll toss it over to Terry. Pew, pew.
That was great. Thank you. Um, I know God. We talked about the word no earlier. I was to know happiness. I was to know peace. Nine step promises. To gnosis, it's experiential, right? Like I know that Paige likes to birdwatch. I've seen her do it. You know, I know Babe is 4'11". I met him. I gave him a hug. You know, I know Mimi's husband likes to work out. Every time I talk to him, he's fucking working out. You know, and I know Elaine likes to celebrate Christmas like every single day. Still continues to this day, even though it was a couple months ago. I know that, like I know my son, I know my wife, I know, X, Y, and Z, like I know it. Peter M said that God can't be explained, he can only be experienced. Same thing. It's an experiential thing, something that I can't process up here. And I love how the doctor says, like, yeah, look, even though you're like a good religious dude, right, that ain't gonna help you. You knowing everything about God and religion is not gonna help you stay sober. It's an experiential thing, right? And thank God he said that, right? And the doctor repeated himself. Vital spiritual experience, necessary for life, life-giving. I need this in order to recover. Do I want this? He's going to ask us in 2 pages. Do I want this thing? Like, what the hell does that mean, Paige? Like, it always stumped me with that last sentence of this chapter. Do I want this thing? That means, do I want a spiritual experience? Do I want a personality change sufficient to recover from alcoholism? Do I want to be brainwashed? That's me. And I needed to be brainwashed. My brain needed a good washing. Uh, my kid he's got get the giggles, so I got to get going. Thank you,
Awesome.
Kate. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Pew, pew, pew. And we just had a question in the chat, so that's what I'm going to end with. How do we get this spiritual experience? How do we get this thing that I need in order to get sobriety? The simple answer, and it really is this simple, is I work the 12 steps as outlined in this book, like my life depends on it because it does. That is how we get the spiritual experience. That's what we do. And that is the sole purpose of the 12 steps, to get me from that place of hopelessness to that place of hope, where I'm at that place of freedom that they were talking about with my homie Roland Hazard. So we'll leave it there, and I'll stop the recording, and we can wrap it all up with the Serenity Prayer. So give me 1 sec.